connects and everyone's able to see. For those who are new to the site, right now we're just making sure there's some changes with Google and YouTube. And so we're just making sure everyone's going to be able to see all the data. All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. This is No Sound Bites Allowed, and I am Michael Vasquez, your host and the Dragon of the Southern Tier. And I hope everyone is happy to be here. I'm happy to have you here with me. Excuse me. This is long-form political commentary, and I enjoy being able to have that kind of discussion with you. We're going to be talking about quite a few issues here, and I can see already that we have Jason with us. Fantastic, Jason. Thank you for letting me know, because YouTube's been a little problematic lately. They're changing up all their systems. They like to silence people. But today I want to talk about something that's rather interesting and timely, and a little bit ahead of its time, because we're going to be talking about the 2020 election and the things that are going to be influencing that election. And more importantly, perhaps most importantly, is what is going to happen on day 59. What happens on November 4th, that Wednesday, after we've seen the election? What is going to be happening in America? What can we predict? What can we see? And I'm going to give you both, not only what I think could be happening, but I'm also going to tell you who I think is going to win and what I think is going to happen when that candidate does win. And I want to hear from you as well about this and how we get to that point. Because I think on day 59, we're going to be shocked about where America stands. I think we're going to be collectively upset about where America will be on day 59. And I have very specific reasons for that. So let's try and go into that a little bit. Obviously, there's a lot that is happening right now. And I'm going to get into the BLM news, the riots that have happened in Rochester and Louisville, Kentucky. Yeah, people may not be familiar. 100 days of rioting in Louisville, Kentucky. The riots in Rochester, New York, out in Portland. I'm going to get to that. But first, before I get to that, there's something that I want to address. We've heard, or it's been alleged by the news organization, that President Trump 2 years ago said that he thinks that the military is full of losers. I really, really can't believe that. I really can't believe that. And the reason why I don't believe that has nothing to do with whether I support President Trump or not. It has to do with the reality that the President Trump, if he had said something like that 2 years ago, the news media would have been demonizing him. There would be no escape for him. That would have been news that would have taken us into the midterm elections. That would be news that would be continuous to this moment. We'd be hearing that news from CNN, MSNBC, Vox, Huffington Post, telling us about how much President Trump hates the military, and therefore, he's a bad guy and we have to discount him. It would be used to offset the things that he's done, say, with the Middle East, and how he's promoted the Middle East peace between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. So I don't believe it's true. In addition, the fact is that we see that there have been 4 unnamed sources, some mysterious people, that say that President Trump said this in 2018 in France. You know what we don't know? Who are these people? What are their political objectives? What are their backgrounds? Who is this that's saying this? But I can tell you that 10 people have come out and said that this is absolutely not true. Now, mind you, at the moment I have an article from The Hill, and it's one of the very clearest statements, I believe, debunking this idea. John Bolton, who is no friend of President Trump. John Bolton, who wrote a book trashing President Trump, came out and very clearly said he never heard the president say that. He never heard the president say anything like that. Now, As always, the links to everything I'm going to be referencing is going to be in the description on YouTube, so you'll be able to see this. But it just makes it very clear. John Bolton said, I didn't hear that. It's that simple. It's that clear. He didn't hear it. He never heard it said. In fact, there have been, I believe, 10 different sources throughout the government that have been found that say President Trump never said that. So you have to ask yourself, why, if that's never been said, why would we hear that? Why would that come up? Well, because the Democratic Party is in a very, very bad place right now. Because Nancy Pelosi has just proven that there's no reason for the overreaction that we've had to the COVID-19 coronavirus in the United States. She's walking around, as we've all seen by now, in a hair salon and without a mask, saying, oh, no, this is, it's a setup. Well, not really. She's one of the most powerful individuals and definitely the most powerful woman in the United States at this time. If she was set up by a hair salon for an appointment she set up, her office set up, then, why is she even in office? And that question, why is she in power if she can be deluded in by a hair salon, was devastating. And I'm going to get to the comment in just one second. And the fact that we have Joe Biden finally admitting 100 days later that there is violent protest going on, that when we see buildings burning in the background of CNN, that's not mostly peaceful. That's not mostly organized. That's a riot. That's looting. That's arson. That is a crime. And Joe Biden has finally admitted it, even though we've seen this across the country for over 100 days. So that's why we heard the Democrats come out and say, oh, look, Trump said something against the troops. It's a distraction. There is nothing credible to it. Otherwise, there would be names saying exactly when it was said. I think that's very clear. Jason from Binghamton, one of our fans here and someone we enjoy speaking with, says that mainstream media is nothing more in America as the sensationalized tabloids. As long as the social media giants don't squash the free market of ideas, quality journalism will find its way to the top. There are some sources out there that I think are very credible, but I do believe you're right, Jason, that news media is dwindling. It's failing because it won't address very simple truths that we know. When you can see over 100 days of rioting and looting in Portland and the news media doesn't talk about it, when we see buildings burning and the news media says mostly peaceful, you know you're being lied to. There is an agenda there. It is obvious. I guarantee you, if any group that was even remotely considered right of center had set a building on fire, you would not hear the words, oh, that's mostly peaceful. But that goes into what are we seeing for the election? A mentality is being set. You have to be fearful. You have to be distrustful. The president is against you, and Joe Biden is for you. Even though we haven't heard Joe Biden basically say anything since March. He's been in the basement. He's popped up, 5 times? 5 times? He's almost never taken any comments except when they were pre-set by his campaign. That says a lot. That says a lot about what we're going to see on day 59, which I'm going to get to. One of the other things that we have to wonder about is we have a lot of misinformation out there, and I want to get right to that. One of the things that we see, here's a tweet by Jack Prosovic, who is retweeting from Mike Cernovich, a reasonably credible member of the press and a blue check from Twitter itself, who's talking about, in reaction to what happened in Kenosha, which is still ongoing, that these 2 individuals as we saw in the news, were arrested. The Department of Justice caught these two individuals coming up from, I believe it was Missouri or Minnesota, and grabbed these men because they were they were going out and they were planning to kill individuals. They had a car full of illegal weapons and they were going to kill somebody. That was their plan. And these individuals, the news media identified as members of the far right. Except that doesn't really make any sense. As we can see from Cernovich, one of the individuals has self-identified as a left anarchist, something that was existent well before their arrest. And in addition to that, that was something in August. They were arrested in September. So this is pre-existing. In addition to this, their statement alone, saying that as far-right members, they support Hamas. Well, that doesn't really make much sense because most organizations, in fact, all of the far-right that I am aware of, support Israel. Except for, the extremist racist groups that may exist, the KKK, which I don't consider part of the far right. They're a very separate organization itself. But you can call them a fringe of the far right, much like Antifa is a fringe of the far left. And I don't really count them. But other than that, everyone supports Israel. That's one of the big issues in modern politics right now, that we hear the right supports Israel, the left supports Hamas, they support Palestine. It doesn't make any sense. Again, we have major news media that are not presenting facts in a logical manner. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any more sense than when we see a building burning and they say that's mostly peaceful. You can't logically justify that. It makes no sense. So walking into this, as we have an election that may contain millions of mail-in ballots, we have a distrust of the media that's ongoing. And that's going to be very important for day 59. We also have a problem with our economy, a massive problem with our economy. And that's going to come up on day 59. Now, a lot of people may not be familiar, and I can say this in New York State, as well as across the country, California, Illinois. You can point to almost anywhere in the nation about this. But what we're seeing is a failure. The economy is breaking down. I know we just went to 1.4 million new jobs, or people returning to their jobs, just in the month of August, as reported by the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. And I'm going to get to that in 1 second, because there's something important in that number. But what we're also seeing at the same time is places like New York State, they're going bankrupt. Right now, Governor Cuomo is begging for $16 billion. $60 billion to take care of economic policies he's had for almost a decade now that have completely failed and have been leading to the bankruptcy of the state. As I've reported several times before, New York State was going to lose $8 billion this year alone before COVID ever shut down a single thing. And now, with the problems of COVID, we're seeing $14 billion of losses just in this year alone. That $60 billion number is to bail out the state for all of the policies previously. New York State didn't lose $60 billion in 2020. They've lost $60 billion since Governor Cuomo was elected. And he's trying to get a bailout to save him and maintain the blue state. That is a fact. And we're seeing this not just in New York. Not just in New York State. That's in California. That's in Illinois. That's in Washington State. We're seeing this across the nation. That we have politicians who are looking to be bailed out. And the news media, by the way, are ignoring this. I think it was a week ago, last week, when I was mentioning Broome County on July 22nd was told by County Executive Jason Garnar they are going bankrupt, that my county is going to be the second county in the United States to go bankrupt because they had no more money left, which would mean hundreds, roughly 300 jobs being laid off, individuals' pensions not being paid, possible cuts in firefighters, in EMTs and emergency medical, cuts in the police department potentially. Massive changing of life. And somehow that deadline was September 1st. Today is September 6th. And Jason Garnar, County Executive Garnar, hasn't mentioned a word. Nothing's changed. So either he lied to the public on July 22nd, or suddenly he found money that he did not have, that has not come back into this community, and he was using the opportunity to try and beg for money along with Governor Cuomo to bolster the claim by Governor Cuomo that New York State needs $60 billion. That's terrifying, and that's a problem because going forward, you're going to hear more counties doing the same thing. You're going to hear more states saying the same thing. And I know this because as much as the economy is improving, and you can see here from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, while we can see it, there is a massive improvement. There is a problem. And that problem inherently is the fact that we don't have enough people in the civilian labor force. Are not in the labor force is dwindling, but not enough. More importantly than just that, we have also, and I think this is probably the most important thing, the self-employed. We all agree that this is the engine that provides the jobs in America. 70% of jobs come from small businesses. Well, we are currently back at the level we were at in August of 2019. Over almost 9 million, 8.9 million jobs in August of 2019, 8.8 million jobs, or businesses, I should say, now. And yet, we're at 8.4 unemployment. The problem is that we have people who are not in the labor force. And this is a graph that's showing you from 2009, the day that Obama got in, until 2016, the people who did not count as part of the unemployment rate, people who were not getting checks from the government, increased by 15 million people. And what's really important about that is that number under President Trump was roughly stable at about 95 and a half, 96,000. And what's very important about that is we saw the spike in April and we are recovering, but we are a long way from that recovery. So economically, our nation's in big trouble. Now, if it were just those factors, and I know this may seem a little dry today, but this is important. In understanding all of this, we get to understand something that's very critical. On day 59, the day after the election in 2020, whomever is president will have unemployment that is higher than expected. That is going to be higher than we had been since President Trump was in office prior to COVID. We are most likely going to see someone who is going to be in office having to deal with a second round of shutdowns to COVID-19 because there will be a surge in flu, there will be a surge in COVID-19. And we're going to see states like New York State, California, the bluest of the blue states, who already have not returned back to normal, states that are currently still having businesses that are shut down. They're going to be in worse case. They're going to lose more businesses. I mean, we've already seen a mass exodus out of New York City and out of New York State, state that I'm very familiar with since I live in it, where people are leaving because the taxes are too high and the businesses can't open and people can't get work. Now imagine what happens when the second round of COVID comes out and the state doesn't have federal aid and there isn't enough money. In fact, right now we see that Governor Cuomo has already taken 20% of the funding for schools and colleges, over $320 million from the education budget for our kids in schools from high school to elementary, and over $430 million from universities across the state. That's money that's gone. That's teachers that will not be available to teach the kids. That's supplies that the kids will not have to be able to learn. That's going to affect all of our families. And it's only getting worse. The left has created a scenario with fear of COVID, something that is 99% survivable. 99%. There was an article, and I should have actually brought it up, that just came out. I believe it was a study by one of the universities. It wasn't MIT, it was another one. But one of the universities just did a study that if you're 50, your chance of dying from COVID is 1 in 19 million. 1 in 19 million. This is something that's absolutely survivable. And yet we have fear. And that's what's promoting the push to 2020, in my opinion, from my analysis. And that's why I believe that the election is going to be won 65%. It's not a landslide, but it's going to be 65% in favor of one candidate. And the nation is going to react to that. And how's the nation going to react? Let me tell you, we're going to see riots. We're going to see fires. I believe that within an hour of there being a declared winner or a presumptive winner on November 3rd, we're going to see riots in cities across the nation. We're going to see fires across the nation. We're going to see violence across the nation. And here's the thing that's really going to surprise a lot of people. It doesn't matter who wins. It doesn't matter if both Joe Biden wins or President Trump wins. There's going to be riots regardless. I do believe that if it's President Trump, you're going to see worse, and you will probably see people killed. And I hope to God that I am wrong. I want that prediction to be wrong. I want there to be peace and stability, but I don't believe that's going to happen. Because we already see members of Antifa are more than willing to go out and kill anyone that doesn't agree with them. There was, I believe I have it here, the reports that we know from Portland. And by the way, folks, you can call in. You can comment. You can reach us at, the number is 607-242-1582. You can reach us in, as you see by Jason, on YouTube and leave comments. Or, of course, you can always leave a message on Facebook. Wow. It looks like I'm dropping off. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I just noticed, I'm sorry, my internet connections somehow look very bad at the moment. And I don't know why, because they shouldn't be. Let's see if that improves it a little bit. And I think this is coming from Google and YouTube, but I apologize. Trying to streamline this as I go. And hopefully people are still there with me. You can still see what's going on here. So I'm going to keep going. So we know that in Portland, there was the 100% Antifa protester, the member of Antifa, the individual promoted by Vice, saying that he was, that was Michael Rhino, who killed a President Trump supporter. And we know that he did this very explicitly. We know that and let me show you. We know that based on The Atlantic, both men were armed, that both men were walking first, but we know who did open fire first, and that was Michael Reinhold. And we know that Michael Reinhold, who is right here, premeditated the event. He planned this. Now, mind you, in Vice, they were very quick to put out the news that he was doing self-defense. He was trying to protect himself. Except the evidence is that this was a premeditated attack. It is believed that he was reaching for his gun and that he was stalking these men. And this happens to be Jay Danielson, who died. And this is coming from the New York Post just yesterday. So we know that everything that was said in the Vice article was a lie. That this man targeted Trump supporters because he didn't like their opinion. Now you may say to me, well, Mike, but why would we see that affect the election? Well, it's going to affect the election in a couple of ways. Because right now, 62% of the nation don't want to say, I just got a comment from Jason saying it was lagging. No, Jason, I think it's YouTube. I think YouTube directly, but possibly Facebook as well, are just not functioning properly right now. My stream coming out is incredibly, I have a solid stream going out. But somewhere on the other side, there is a problem. So I can't fix that. That's coming from YouTube. That's coming from Facebook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep going forward, and I am taping this. If there's low quality in the original stream, the live stream, what I will do is I will put out the copy, the taping that I have right now, and put that out so people will be able to see everything. So I do apologize, but this is something that is beyond me. This is coming from the internet overlords from both YouTube and Facebook. So let me explain. So as I said, 62% of people are afraid to speak because they know that there are members of Antifa and Black Lives Matters that are more than willing to attack, that are more than willing to try and kill people because they have a different point of view. And it's not just Michael Reinhold. We saw in Indianapolis about a month and a half ago, Jessica Dottie Whitaker was killed because she said all lives matter. And that's all it took. And the BLM supporters shot her dead, 24 years old, had a 3-month-old baby. And we've seen this from BLM in many places. I know someone's going to say, well, Mike, there's a report, though. You're making it seem so extreme. 93% of all racial justice protests, and they're not protests, in the United States have been peaceful. It's been peaceful, according to CNN. The same station, same news content that tells us that, a burning building is mostly peaceful. No, that's not true. That's not true. And let's really dive into this. We know that there have been at least 220 different cities that have had violent protests. We know that Portland has had violent protests for over 100 days. According to live streams just last night, protesters in Louisville have been mentioning that they've been protesting for over 100 days. But when we know that there are over 220 locations, cities across the United States, which includes Portland, Seattle, Kenosha, Austin, New York City, Indianapolis, where we know that there have been violent protests and that several of these protests have led to death. Yeah, people are being silenced. They are being forced into silence, which is a terrifying thing. Absolutely terrifying. And we should be very concerned about that. It means that no matter who wins, there is probably a substantial amount of America that is going to be angry. And I think that individuals like Antifa, individuals like Portland, are going to be emboldened, that they're going to go forward and they're going to be even worse. Whether it's President Trump that wins, who they despise, and they are willing to kill the supporters of, that is a fact. It's not a question. We've seen them try and attack, possibly intending to kill Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha. We see that Michael Reinold in Portland did it. We see people coming from Missouri that were stopped by the Department of Justice with the intention of killing people. We see that there was the 16-year-old and 19-year-old in Seattle at the Chaz. We see, which is, by the way, not counted, the Seattle Chaz and the violence that happened there, the rapes that were going on there, the domestic abuse that was going on there, the murder of a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old at the Chaz were not counted in this study of 93%. They were not counted as part of the non-peaceful, the violent protests, the actual rioting and looting and destruction. They didn't count Portland. Think about that. This study is absolutely wrong when you can say that people took over by force a section of a city and basically held hostage citizens under the force of roving bands of individuals with guns and who used violence to impose their will. And that's not included in a study that says 93% of protests in the United States have been peaceful. They don't count the Atlanta shooting where a 8-year-old was killed because a BLM supporter wouldn't let a car drive past him. They don't count Indianapolis where a mother, Jessica Dottie Whitaker, was killed because she said all lives matters, and they say it's 93%. I tell you that is a lie. And I tell you that I believe that BLM will be encouraged. They will go forward. I mean, look at what happened in Portland just last night. The 100th day of protesting, and we see that they were throwing firebombs. As you can see from the Portland police video. They're throwing Molotov cocktails. They're throwing Molotov cocktails. They're setting innocent individuals, as you can see right over here. That's an innocent man who was set on fire by BLM in a, I'm sure CNN described, mostly peaceful protest last night in Portland. Think about that. And do you think that these individuals in BLM, these individuals in Antifa, are going to stop? Do you think they're going to stop? Obviously, they won't stop if we see President Trump reelected. Even Biden has said that, do you really think the violence will stop? But here's the thing. The violence isn't going to stop with Biden elected either. He's no better. He doesn't even want to acknowledge the violence. And if he's not willing to even acknowledge the violence until it affects his polling, do you think he's going to do anything about when he gets elected and they continue? And the news media continues to tell you, no, it's mostly peaceful. Think about it. Do you think BLM, Antifa, the violent rioters and looters in those organizations, and its charter, its whole message, do you think they're going to stop demanding that police are completely defunded and the riots based on that idea just because Joe Biden's in office? Or do you think they're going to keep going because they're getting away with it? Because the news media has supported them. What's Joe Biden going to do? Is he going to suddenly send in troops? Well, he doesn't advocate that. Is he going to defund the cities, as President Trump has stated he wants to do? Joe Biden is against that. How is he actually going to stop them? Well, the only answer I can see is they're going to continue to riot because they know he's not going to do any of those things. So what he will do is capitulate. He will give them what they want. He will appease them. That's what Joe Biden's going to do. And when Joe Biden does that, it's only going to get worse. And I tell you, the capitulation is really terrifying right now because this is what it. Think about it. The capitulation is so bad right now that we see that the NFL is promoting a rapist under the title of Black Lives Matters. Jacob Blake, who is not dead, is a convicted rapist. And the NFL and the NBA are celebrating this individual. This is their hero. This is why Kenosha is in riots right now. It's why 3 people died. It's why buildings have been burned down en masse. And this is something that, we can't even hear Joe Biden complain about. We don't see Democrats complaining and saying, you know what? Were the police overreacting? Was 7 shots necessary? Maybe not. But you know what? There's no reason to promote the rapist who had a warrant for his arrest out, who was actively violating the police and carrying a knife, as has been reported since the incident started. And, I'll even go one further. Let's say that Jacob Blake or any event, doesn't matter. There's an event, there's an action where the police overreacted, they abused their power, and they killed someone. And let's say that does that justify $55 million worth of damage, as happened in Minneapolis? Millions, tens of millions of dollars of damage in Portland. Millions of dollars of damage in New York City. Does it justify? Where is it? I want to show you something. Let's say, and I want to show you what I'm talking about here. Let's say that you're in Rochester, and I'll get to the specific case in a second, but imagine that you're in Rochester and you happen to be that guy, this guy right here. Or say you're this woman right here. You don't even know something happened, maybe. Or you're not involved in it. You're out because it's your wedding anniversary. Maybe you just got engaged. Maybe it's your first date. But here you are, relaxing. Maybe you're a doctor or a nurse that were just saving someone's life in your shift. And you're going out to relax with your colleagues, being happy that you just saved the life of a premature baby, an old woman who has 15 grandkids. Who knows? You're just a human being. And is it justified that suddenly these guys decide to go and you're having dinner and they just come in and they decide that you're going to be punished? They're going to destroy the place you're eating at. They're going to harass and intimidate you, that they are going to try and use fear to harm you. And I understand. There's a couple of guys like this guy right here who's saying, no, don't cause any violence. Don't do violence. You know what? Didn't happen. Because that guy was silenced and this mob walked on in. This is them driving the people away before that guy came up and said, stop the violence. Look at the violence. Look at that woman running away. She had nothing to do with what happened. Nothing. These people had nothing to do with what happened. They were eating a meal. Do you think that that's going to stop because Joe Biden gets elected? Because Joe Biden is going to give Antifa fewer police? That he's going to appease them by giving them what they want? I mean, maybe you think that there should be a living wage. Okay. Maybe you think that the student loan should be eliminated. Maybe you think that there should be no police. Okay. Let's say you think that. Does that mean you get the right to take away someone's property because they disagree with you? Do you get to punish that person? Do you get to destroy their life because of that? Do you get to destroy, I want to go back to this. Do you get to destroy this business? Do you get to destroy these people's lives, terrorize them, and destroy this business because they don't agree with you? Because they don't want you, they don't want to pay for the student loans that are eliminated. They don't want to pay for the living wage that business may not be able to afford, especially now, because they don't want to get rid of the police that would have stopped this from happening. Let me ask you, what's justified? Because I can tell you on day 59, no matter who gets elected, they're not going to stop. Individuals like, and I want to bring this up, individuals like Masai Andrews, who is arrested. And that riot I just showed you, this riot in Rochester, Masai Andrews was arrested. Now you may remember that name. He was also responsible and arrested at the Columbus Day Parade in Binghamton, New York, for trying to take over, for intimidation and fear of the public. He was also the individual at the Back the Blue event I had in Binghamton, New York, with his boombox, scaring and terrifying the news media and preventing them from doing their job of covering an event and preventing me from being able to speak with my First Amendment rights. And here he is. He ran up from Binghamton to Rochester to terrorize people, to try and destroy a business and terrorize people for no reason other than he wanted to, because those people had nothing to do with anything that was happening in Rochester. They had nothing to do with the reason for the protest. And that is not a peaceful protest. That is violence. That's intimidation. That's fear. That's fear-mongering. And I can tell you, on day 59 from today, the day after the election, that's not going to change. And I don't care which person you have in office. But I can tell you that I believe very strongly that if President Trump is reelected, and I think he will be, and I think he will win by 65%, I do think that these elements, the BLM, the Antifa, these radical leftists, not the main people of the public, not rank and file Democrats, they're going to go out and they are going to cause riots and looting and fires within an hour of the presumption that President Trump has won. If it's Biden, I think it'll be within a week. But if it's President Trump, it'll be within an hour. And they're going to say it's spontaneous, that this is unexpected. No, it's not. It is absolutely expected. Because the only person who is actually trying to stop these individuals is President Trump. The only person who would appease them is Joe Biden. And that means that our economy is going to get far, far worse. That we're going to see these small businesses, I expect it to drop back down to April levels. That we're going to see small businesses close across this nation. Now, not everyone will agree with me on this. Some people are going to say, Mike, not quite true. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's going to happen. And I hope that you are right. But let me ask a question. On day 59, let's look forward. On day 59, after we have an indication, an idea of who might be president, why wouldn't BLM and Antifa riot? And anyone who has that answer, whether it's live or afterwards, please tell me. And I know there's a problem with the internet right now. I know that this is having a massive lag. I know the system is just absolutely not performing correctly. Yeah. But I want you to know, even without that, there is the question. Why won't they? They have one candidate, Joe Biden, who is apparently willing to appease them. We know that his running mate and probably the next president, if he were to be elected, Kamala Harris, who would probably be president within 6 months of the election, Kamala Harris has already said she wants to take away Americans' rights to defend themselves. She supports Antifa and BLM. She's already had, through her staff, they have already paid to take care of BLM, to get people out of jail, to pay their bails, to help fund that organization. That's appeasement. That's coming from the Democratic ticket, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And if they're willing to appease them as they kill children, as they kill moms, as they destroy cities, $55 million worth of reconstruction in Minneapolis. And I know people say, well, there's insurance. No, there isn't. That is a lie. The cost is more than the insurance will cover. Not every business has insurance. Not every person has insurance. When they destroy your car, do you have insurance for that? Is it enough to cover that? What about your home? What about your property? What about your life? To say that insurance will take care of it all doesn't absolve. This is a crime. This is a crime. And they are willing, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are willing to absolve that, to ignore it, like Representative Nadler, to completely ignore that it exists, to turn a blind eye and let it go on, and even encourage it. Why would BLM stop? Let me go even further. BLM absolutely will lose their minds and go even into overdrive, I believe, if President Trump is in, because he is actually trying to force states like New York, like California, and the cities like Seattle, Portland, New York City, Washington, D.C., to actually protect the public. And they're saying that by saying, hey, if you don't protect the public, I will take away your funding. Joe Biden does not. Kamala Harris doesn't. So there's an absolute reason BLM doesn't want more police. They want less police. They want less protection for the public. They want people to have fewer firearms to defend their homes and to defend themselves. It's a sad day. It's a sad day because on day 59, We're going to see more riots. We're going to see more fires. We're going to see more violence. And the only answer to that is we need to have our cities and our states step up and defend the public, to protect the people. That is the purpose, the first and main purpose of the government, whether it's local or federal, is to protect the people, first and foremost. And that means that you don't, like de Blasio, like Andrew Cuomo, like Governor Newsom or Whitmer, you don't get to pick and choose. Ted Wheeler, mayor of Portland, or we're seeing de Blasio in New York. You don't get to pick sides. I don't care what their political ideology is. The fact is, their first job is to protect the people. That doesn't mean have less police. That means to have possibly more. Definitely better trained police. Because individuals that we have seen, like Messiah Andrews, who has been arrested for multiple cases of rioting and disturbing the police and inciting, not those charges, but his actions. These people don't stop. They don't stop. Messiah Andrews isn't stopping. Eric Goetz isn't stopping. These people have been in Binghamton, New York. They've been arrested for this before. We have seen Messiah Andrews actively going out and trying to disturb the peace, actively trying to silence people's First Amendment rights, actively trying to incite violence, in my opinion. And they have been arrested for this over and over again. They have no intention of stopping. Not until they get what you have. Not until you submit to their will. You know, the internet obviously doesn't like me having this conversation. The internet is, really upset because my settings haven't changed, but the internet did. So I think Facebook, I think YouTube are very terrified of this conversation. I'm not telling you your vote is pointless. I'm actually telling you the opposite. I'm not telling you that you should be afraid. I'm telling you to stand up. I'm not telling you that it won't make a difference to your life about whether it's President Trump or President Biden. What I am telling you is appeasement isn't going to work. What I am telling you is BLM is afraid and terrified that governments, local, federal, state, stepping up and doing their job of protecting the people, they're terrified of that. And the answer to both of those things is more fear, more violence, more intimidation from these radical leftist fringe elements. And we need to stand up to that and say no. We need to stand up and say we don't accept that. Democrats, the elected officials, the candidates need to stand up across the state and say we reject this, that it is unacceptable, and that people will be held accountable for their actions. I don't know. I don't think it's such a strange idea. Why they won't do this, I don't know. But if they don't do this, and I don't think they will, then on day 59, that's my prediction. But I do think President Trump's going to win. I do believe that he's going to win because, well, actually, I'll show you why. Because back in 2015, I explained what I believe, and I believe to this day. BLM wants a race war. BLM wants to turn blacks against whites. They want to subjugate whites, essentially creating an economic slavery. Except this time, blacks will be over whites. People of color will be over others. And then goes into the gender identity politics of the Democratic Party, where if you're gay, you have even more power. If you happen to be transgender, you have even more power. If you're a person of color and happen to be gay or transgender, then you have even more power. That people are boxed into smaller and smaller groups, and each of these groups are fighting for more and more power. And that leaves you at the end of the day with a problem. You know, I truly believe what I said there. BLM would have me and those who are darker skinned in my family to be angry and to hate people in my family who are lighter skinned. Why? What did they do? How did they deserve that? That's not a choice that I will make, and that is not a decision that I will do. I will not hate my family just because they have lighter skin than me. I said that in 2015. I say it again today. I reject that. That is wrong. And because of that, BLM won't stop. But we, the people, need to stand up. And we need a leader who is strong enough to stand with us, to lead the charge, to bring law and order, and to protect the people, which is the number one job of government. And if they don't, our economy will be destroyed. Our society will be destroyed. And I strongly believe that. So it looks like there's incredible lag going on right now. YouTube, Facebook are a mess for no reason, possibly because of the subject matter I'm talking about. Their bots and their systems are seeing what this subject was and trying to prevent you from seeing it. I will put out another copy of this so that people can see it in full, and I look forward to your comments. You are always welcome to comment. I will be looking for your comments on YouTube, on Facebook. You can text us at 607-242-1582. This is one of the most important elections we could possibly have. At the local level, the state and federal level. It's not just about President Trump. It's about our local communities. Because if we do not go out and vote, if we do not make a statement about what we want our country to be, then what we're going to see is that our country is going to become this. This will be America if we do not stand up as one group saying, no, we don't accept the racism. We don't accept the violence. We do not agree with individuals imposing their will on others. We can improve America. We can always make it better, but this isn't the way. This is not improving America. This is not how we make our nation better. So I am getting a comment from Jason, and he says, what do you think about the women on the BU track team? I'm not exactly sure what you mean. I do know that there are several sports groups who are standing up for Black Lives Matters, and they are protesting. And I disagree with that. I don't care if it's the NBA. I don't care if it's the NFL. I don't care if it's Binghamton University track team. If they are supporting individuals who are using fear, intimidation, and violence to force people to act as they want, then that is wrong, and I disagree with it. I am not supporting the NFL this year. I am not supporting the NBA. I am not going to support any organization, any sports team who want to take their politics and force it on me. LeBron James, if he wants to actually make a statement about how he supports, you know what, LeBron James, you've got $36 million a year in your contract, if I remember correctly. How about you take $10 million and go into Chicago, into Portland, into Seattle, and rebuild the businesses that have been burned down? Put those black business owners back as whole. Then maybe I'll listen to what you have to say about politics. But if you want to tell me you can't play a game, you can't compete in a sport like race or like track team, if you can't do that because you want me to submit and say that I should hate my brothers and sisters who happen to be lighter skinned than me, no, I'm sorry. I reject that. I reject that. So I'm not sure exactly what they were saying on the BU track team, but if it's in line with what I've just described, if they are saying that I should be supporting the violence that people are engaging in for criminals like Jacob Blake and for, in Atlanta, and so many of these cases, that I should hate my family for that? No, I disagree, and I reject that. I reject it completely. For me, it's just that simple. I love my family. My family includes people who are white or half white, half Hispanic. And I'm not going to reject them because somebody else says they don't want to see some police because they're willing to enact violence against me. And I tell you, it's been very personal for me. I've had several friends who won't speak to me because of this. I have several friends who who no longer associate with me because they're afraid of violence being put against me by individuals possibly like Messiah Andrews, possibly like Eric Goetz, who might try to harm me or those people around me because they don't agree, because they want me to hate someone. I reject that. And you know what? While I suffer for it, I still stand up, and I will stand up and say, no, I disagree. And I think we all should. But thank you, Jason, for making your comment. So, one moment. We're getting a call. This is a different line, but we'll see. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear us? Hello? Nope, not on that line. They hung up. Let's try this line. Hello. This is No Sound Bites Allowed. Can you hear us?
Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Oh, you can. Okay. It is Jason. How are you doing,
Yep.
Jason?
Good. Yeah. So I wanted to, kind of follow up on the Binghamton University track team. What they did, they formed a track, or not track club, a star club to empower the students, and it's completely based on race. So what this is basically creating a segregated group of individuals based upon their color of the skin who say that they unite together, and when you read this, it's pretty grotesque. And I just, I was hoping that you had actually bumped into it yourself. But again, this is part of, what the indoctrination at Binghamton University, which allows a lot of stuff that stems from critical race theory. And this is just another one of those programs, or not a program. This is actually, it looks like it was organically brought up by student athletes themselves.
Yeah, but we've also seen organically that students who have been trained all their lives in high schools and colleges, especially in the colleges, to believe in identity, gender politics, that someone is better or worse because of their race, because of their gender, because of their sexual preference. So the fact that students are now acting on that, I do not count that as being separate. that is a direct consequence of what they've been trained to believe. We are training the next generation to believe that white people are evil, black people are good, minorities are good. And that's just wrong. We're training people to judge people on the very things that we said, at least in the 1960s, that we don't believe in. And so if they're saying that they have a safe space, if they have a separate, segregated organization, then there's a question here, and that's a problem. Because didn't we get rid of segregation because it's wrong? Because it's not cohesive? I know that we got rid of it, and in my lifetime, that's why we have things better now. Why you don't see as much racially motivated violence in this nation. We really don't. In the 52 years I've been alive, things are better today, or they were, than they were in the 1970s. But we're going backwards here. BLM and Antifa and the far leftists, not Democrats, but these organizations, they exist to drag us backwards in time. Except this time, they're in charge as opposed to someone else. But it's the same problem, same crime, same violence, in my opinion. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I was gonna, I just have the article in front of me, and I was just gonna, state. They say they have four main missions, and what it reads here is, four main missions of the organization is to foster a solidarity among student athletes of color within athletics, to create a space where experiences and issues regarding race can be discussed. And it could provide student athletes of color with opportunities for growth and development, and empowering student athletes of color to strive for success in every regard.
Okay, wait a minute. Before you go further, now,
Yep.
I have, just so everyone knows, I don't know this article. I haven't read the article. I'm not doubting what you're saying. But let me comment on it from what you've just said. How is that different than having the First Amendment right and being able to do that anywhere at any time in the United States? Why do you need to create a special group for that? You can have a bunch of your friends do that. I'm not saying they can't, but I'm saying, why does this need to be segregated by race? I can go on Facebook right now, talk to a dozen of my friends. I can go to a dozen different groups and talk about anything I want to. Theoretically, if Facebook doesn't shut it down, if YouTube, as they are right now, doesn't shut it down, theoretically, we can do that. And in a college setting where you're supposed to be introduced to different cultures, different ideas, different people, and learn to integrate and be able to understand them, not necessarily agree, but to understand them, then isn't that what college is for? Why does it have to be related on race? I can have a conversation about race. I was having one last night. I've had several. I don't need to be anywhere special for that. I don't need special rules for that. And I definitely don't need to take away other people from being able to have that conversation. In fact, if I'm in an echo chamber where everybody is saying white people are evil, then all I'm going to hear is white people are evil. You should be hearing someone who says they aren't, whether you agree with it or not, just to know whether or not you know what you're talking about. Maybe even talk to some of those white people who you're considering that are evil and let them have a conversation, especially if they don't think they're evil. I think it's counterproductive. I think this is going backwards. This is segregation. It's a negative. It's horrible. And if we actually called it what it was, if we said that's segregationist, that idea, no one would ever agree with it. But if you call it Black Lives Matters, it's a good thing.
Yeah, there's another point here in the article that's interesting is that, this is I guess why I kind of jumped to the conclusion that they were part of the activist group within Binghamton University, is because one of the statements they make, they say, we want to mentor other communities like Binghamton High School or organizations involving kids. And they say they just want to help them find a place where they feel comfortable. And so that's what they want to go out in the community, and they want to teach them about what they believe within the differences in color and in the segregation to make them feel comfortable. That's my perspective on that.
Well, for the last, I've been talking about BLM for about 5 years now in Binghamton, in southern tier of New York, and across the nation. And I can tell you that in the southern tier, there really weren't any racially motivated, or very few racially motivated events. But in the last 5 years, that has increased. Been here for 25 years, and in the last 2 years, we've seen a massive increase in the division of people based on race. If they don't feel there's a safe place now, perhaps they should look at what it is they're promoting. The lack of safe spaces is because people are promoting segregation and a lack of communication. They are causing their own discomfort. That is what I believe, and I think that's the real root. And no, they shouldn't have. I'm not going to say they can't talk to kids. Of course they could. It's the First Amendment. But I don't think that they should be isolated and say, oh, well, that's the only one who can talk. You know what? We should have other groups talking about, say, all lives matter. Blue lives matter. Children should be exposed to all of that. If they're going to be exposed to any of it, they should be exposed to all of it to get a more rounded point of view rather than this very racist point of view. Because BLM is racist. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I have no problem with that. People won't vote for me for that. People won't watch this program because of that. I don't care. It's still true. People may not like it. That doesn't change what it is. And I can say that based on what they do. Not what they promise, what they do. And what they do is racist. By and large. Can't say that for everyone. Can't say I'm not saying all the members are. I do want to make that distinction. I'm not saying everybody who's in BLM is racist. I'm saying the organization is. That make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And like I said, if once, I'll send I'll retweet the article over to you so you can take a read of it. I mean, it does actually mention, mention Jacob Blake as well too, and they kind of go to this individual's defense, and then they also, simply, I mean, the last statement's kind of damning too. It's just like, when stuff like this happens in the world against our own people. And that's the thing.
I'm sorry, I do not count Jacob Blake. Jacob Blake is not my own people.
Yeah, well,
okay. My people are not. I don't know about. I can't speak for everyone. I can only speak for my family and people I know, and I can tell you that the people I know across the country are not rapists. They are not people who are abusers, domestic abuse. That's not my people. I reject that. That is not my people. And if someone is saying, oh, but Jacob Blake, realize what you are saying. You are saying that this individual who is a rapist, that individuals like the ones that were shot in Kenosha for child pedophiles and robbers and criminals of this nature. This is what you're saying is your people. Know who you are supporting and what you're holding up as your heroes for children to watch and see. And I reject that. That doesn't mean I think that there should be abuse. No. And we should be able to have better police. And I think in the Southern Tier, we have excellent police because we don't have these situations at all. But I definitely believe we have to understand, what is it you're actually promoting? By accident or on purpose, you are promoting a rapist. In some cases of some of these things, we're talking about people who are dealing drugs to children and pedophiles. We have to be very clear about what we're promoting when we say, oh, I support this person. Look at who you're supporting. That's not my people. I disagree with them there. Go on.
No, I hear you loud and clear. And I guess I'm always kind of griping the situation with identity politics, this critical race theory, and a lot of these racial situations. Unfortunately, I mean, honestly, it's one of those things where I'm always looking, especially locally, for individuals to directly speak out against this ideology. And there are, I mean, I personally am searching, and I honestly really don't see anybody directly counteracting this in our area. And there really needs to be individuals in office to do this, because they are directly trying to reshape Binghamton and our entire country. And they need to have pushback.
I've been asking for several months now. For I'm in a for people who don't know, I'm in a legislative race. I'm running for legislator. I've asked my opponent, Bob Wessler, to come out on record and say what he actually believes. I've asked for County Executive Jason Garnar to say what he believes. I've asked Assemblywoman Donna Lapardo to say what she believes. These are some of the notable Democrats in my region, and not one of them has been willing to say that they disavow violence, they disavow fear and intimidation, that these tactics are being used to try and force people to submit to another group's will. Not one of them have said that. The closest thing I've seen to it is that my opponent, Bob Wessler, has initially apparently supported defunding the police and then made his page private rather than tell people. Donna Lapardo on WMBF, a local talk news program, danced around the conversation and said that she supports her party and whatever her party decides about race and the issues surrounding BLM. But she won't answer it. They need to speak up. This is their party. BLM, Antifa, that's part of their party. They need to speak up and let those people know whether or not they're going to be supported and whether they believe in these ideals. And the public should be able to know that too. It's just amazing to me that we won't see the news media actually ask this question of elected officials. It's ridiculous. But I guarantee you, if I get elected, they're going to ask me in a heartbeat. And that's just amazing.
Well, I don't foresee them actually asking you about race or a lot of these identity politics issues, because the liberal media or anybody who's more progressive is not going to ask you those questions, because you're just going to tear it apart. And that is really, I mean, I don't, one of the things I'm saying though is just eat locally. Look I mean, I know, your race is confined to, what your job is. But when it comes to the entire, Broome County and this, area, when it comes to Binghamton University, a lot of these social matters, I mean, you're going to be far more involved with it, once you get, elected into that position, and you'll have a bigger voice, to, fight against these Marxist, ideologies.
Well, the very first thing is, I don't care what level of government it is. All government at every level, the first job is to protect the public. That's the very first thing they need to do. And everyone in elected government should be uniform in saying we reject violence, we reject fear and intimidation, that we will not allow individuals to go into our communities and to commit the kinds of violence like I'm putting on the screen right this second. That they would reject what we're seeing right here that happened in Rochester, New York, and should happen nowhere in this nation. This is unacceptable. And you don't, wait a minute. Oh, I got my screens all mixed up. But this violence is unacceptable. And I don't care if you're a Democrat, a conservative, a liberal, a progressive, a Republican, a libertarian. This is unacceptable. And everyone should be united in saying, you don't get to terrorize people, drive them out of their dinner, to destroy or damage businesses, to harm and instill fear in people for just simply being alive because you have a feeling. You don't get to do that. I'm not asking for a lot. And that's what this election is about. And that's what's going to be the aftermath of this election, is going to be focused completely on the idea of whether or not this is acceptable. Is it acceptable to go in and to terrorize people because you don't like what they have to say? Matter of fact, you don't even know what the people in this diner, at this restaurant, nobody knows what they think. Why are they being attacked? Because a mob said, let's attack them. That's just unacceptable. That's just unacceptable.
Bennington, we haven't had an incident, well, besides for the burning of the playground, which there's been no claim to who has done that. But, the big thing, though, is I see is that when incidents are happening, I do see individuals being silenced, and they're not allowed to express the way that they feel on certain issues, especially when it comes to, race, when it comes to some of these things that are coming down through the critical race theory. And, I personally am just looking locally, at individuals capitulating to this. Well, I mean, you can just, I guess, look at the Democrat Party when it came to, the Endicott mayor and the deputy mayor now being forced to resign. And then pretty much going into, some of that cultural competency, sort of training, being forced, down their throat. And yet, my big thing is that I just want to see a politician stand up against this sort of thing and just say, hey, look, you know what? These things are racist. You can't force this down another person's voice. If a person has an opinion that you don't like, then you should be able to at least express it. But I see right now, even though we don't have the violence and the burning down here, I see people not speaking up because they are afraid to have an opinion. And I want somebody in politics to go head to head with these guys and basically to give us the opportunity to say what we want without actually having to be canceled.
Well, I have to add one thing to that. And Jason, we need someone who's going to say it before and after the election. We need someone who's going to actually stand there. And this is at every level of government. This is at the local, the state, the federal. We need to have leaders who are going to stand up and say, we will not allow our people to be abused or endangered just because someone has a feeling, because they have a different point of view. And that's critical. If I don't care what election it is, local level to federal level, if that person is unwilling today to say that they will stand up for the public, and if you want to have a protest and it's peaceful, fantastic. And if you're going to be violent, it's not going to be written off as, well, it's just another protest. It's not going to be excused. It's going to be treated like the crime that it is and stopped, because that's part of protecting the public. And if you don't believe that that person's willing to go there and do that for you, they don't need to be in elected office. And I don't care what party they're in, they don't need to be in elected office if they're not willing to stand up to represent you and to say the law needs to be upheld. We need to protect everyone, regardless of their race, their creed, and their color, which BLM and Antifa do not believe. I think it's just that simple. Or it should be.
No, it should be. I mean, I think though, I was thinking back of a lot of people. This actually it kind of extends to Obama. Everybody believed when he became, president that race relationships, would have gotten, better, and we're over.
They got
that.
worse. They got way worse.
Well, they did. Well, the thing was, though, is that his ideology was based on critical race theory. And he created a bunch of victims, every time he spoke about the tragedies that would happen or the shootings and the incidents. And basically he said that every black individual, irregardless of their behavior, they were victims, and they were not held accountable for their own actions.
Yeah, I reject that. I reject that idea of victimhood. That's just ridiculous. I am not a victim. And if someone has to look at you based on your color of skin and say, well, you must be a victim, that completely eliminates whether or not you're intelligent, what you've done with your life, what you're capable of doing with your life. It completely removes any thought of you as a human being. If I look at a woman and say, well, you're a victim, And that's all you are. You're a victim. So you have to be, the government has to come in and protect you because you're a victim and you can't protect yourself. I think every woman would be insulted by that statement. And they should be, because that totally devalues them as a human being capable of having intelligence and actions of their own and being an agent in their own life. And that's what BLM, that's what this progressive movement does. You are not as important as the government, and the government will tell you where you fit. I'm sorry, I reject that, because government in my lifetime has never gotten really anything right. I don't care who's been involved. We don't have a $27 trillion deficit because government got it right. We don't have some of the problems we have in our nation because government got it right. People get it right. Government gets it wrong every time. And you want to give them more power? I don't think so. That's just my thoughts on that.
No, you're 100% right. And the thing is that because critical race theory and a lot of the ideology that Obama had learned was based on a Marxist, ideology, it's all, in his view, it was all about the collective, and it's all about, equity, not equality. And, to do that was basically to take away from one race and give to another race to make everybody equal. And it had nothing to do with empowering the individual, so that basically they can, strive, for what we, see as being the American dream.
You know what? If you're going to, in redistributing wealth, no one becomes wealthy, everyone becomes poor. That's one thing. And, and I think it's got to be clear, whenever you mention the intersectional beliefs and the intersectional policy, people have to understand that's also, when I say gender identity politics, they're the same thing. Different terms. The left likes to use intersectionality because it doesn't tell you what it means. It's a way of disguising it. It sounds really intelligent. It sounds really high end. And most people are going to go, well, they must be right because it's a big word. No, it means gender identity politics. What it means is you are being evaluated based on your race and your sexual preference and your gender, but it has nothing to do with who you are as a human being. So you can be brilliant and you could be beneficial. You could be a doctor, a brain surgeon, and you're treated the exact same way as a crackhead down the street because of the color and race and your sexual preference. And that's wrong. And that's just wrong. So people need to understand what those terms mean.
Yeah, well, it's like systemic racism. Somebody throws that out there, and they can pretty much pin it to anything.
Because it's a generalized term that doesn't mean anything until you actually apply it. And you know what? What's systemic? You know what systemic racism is right now that I see a lot of? The riots that are going on across this nation. Not protests, the riots. Because they're destroying black neighborhoods. They're going out and they're destroying black lives. And in many cases, we've seen at least 15 confirmed cases of them killing individuals, all for this agenda based on race, sex, and sexual preference. And that's backwards. That's going back to the 1930s. That's not moving forward. It's terrifying to me. But hang on, we got about a minute left. So anything else?
Yeah, well, let me just say one thing about the systemic racism and what you kind of mentioned there about the police. And the irony is that you're right. When the system itself, when mayors and when officials of the city decide that they're going to cut back police, especially, and it's due to the fact of the individual's race, because they believe that black individuals or color individuals are better off with not more police in their area. And so systemically, they are making it more easier for individuals who want to commit crimes in those neighborhoods. And so what happens? Individuals who are actually black and minority are actually being systemic. I mean, that's literally systemic racism against them, because now they're being victimized because the law is not being enforced in their neighborhood because of the policies of these radical mayors and council
I think
people.
I think a lot of people have forgotten that there was recently a poll on this, and 80% of blacks want at least as much, if not more, police presence in their neighborhoods. They reject this. The only people who are saying that we need to have less police and that this is are people in BLM and Antifa. They don't want police. Criminals don't want police, but everyone else wants there to be police officers. We want better police, but we want them there. And that's the sad thought. We have this idea that, well, black people are saying they don't want police. No, black people want police. They just don't want to have the hassle of having BLM on their back, because they don't want BLM running rampant and destroying cities like we see in Minnesota, Portland, Seattle, New York City, Dallas. The list goes on and on and on. Austin, so forth. But Jason, I want to thank you for calling in today and putting up with the problems. I noticed that once I got done outlining why I think the election is going to be the way it is, suddenly we see that the stream suddenly got strong again, and YouTube and Facebook suddenly love it. So that's not my system, folks. That was the internet overlords playing games with what they want people to hear. It's sad. But Jason, I do thank you.
All right, have a good one.
You too.
Yep.
So, folks, just to wrap up real quick, the election's absolutely important because the election's going to determine what's going to happen next. I don't want you to be fearful of the idea that, oh, but if I don't vote a certain way, there's going to be violence. No, there's going to be violence no matter what. The only way to stop the violence is to confront it. To confront it with law and order and to make it better. Because I believe we're going to see either President Trump or Biden win by 65%. I will go on record and say I think that's going to be President Trump. But I also am willing to say that regardless of who it is, BLM and the violence we see in cities across this nation are not going to stop. They're not stopping. They're going to keep going because they want you to submit. And as a nation, from the local to the national level, we have to say no. Yes, we can make our nation better, but making it better doesn't mean we submit our freedoms, we submit our will to a fringe group of individuals that have a expressed and defined purpose of getting rid of our freedoms as they exist. That doesn't help us. Appeasement has never worked. That's just what I think. But folks, I want to thank you for putting up with the internet gods as they destroyed this. But I'm going to make sure there's a clean copy out there for you. But I want to thank you for being here with me today. I always love and appreciate each and every one of you every week as you listen. And I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts, no matter what they may be. Folks, well, as long as they're respectful. But folks, I thank you. I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to talking to you next week at 2:30.